Hello, everybody. Welcome. This week's guest, I'm very excited about. I want you to meet Livia Maghiar. She is a board advisor and strategic technology law executive with more than 3 decades of experience guiding organizations through enterprise risk, AI governance, and regulatory change. She's a former enterprise chief privacy officer and head of privacy and technology law at TIAA, and she's really known for her steady judgment in moments of disruption, her ability to translate complex technology and regulatory risks into clear board level strategy. So, we're going to talk about her career, what responsible innovation looks like at the governance level. I'm excited for this conversation. So, Livia, thank you for joining me in the boardroom. How are you?
Mark, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really honored for this opportunity to speak with you about my career, I guess. And I'm doing very well and really looking forward to our
Yes,
conversation.
ma'am. Well, let's start here because your career trajectory is incredible. And I was so impressed getting to talk to you about not only your corporate work, but your board and advisory experience. Bring us up to speed. Like, you've done so many cool things. Walk me through your career.
Well, it's over 3 decades, as you said, which I can't believe myself. But it started in a very different space. It started as a corporate security lawyer, 33, 34 act practice, corporate finance with a white shoe law firm, what used to be called back then. And I stayed with them for about 7 years doing all sorts of transactions back in the early 90s when doing billion-dollar deals was almost unheard of. Now they're kind of cookie cutters these days. It was a very interesting practice. I've learned quite a bit in a sink or swim environment, and I encourage people to go through that kind of boot camp if they're thinking of if they're early on in their legal careers, because it did serve me very well as I progressed in my next steps in my careers. And from there, I actually joined TIAA back in 1997. And I stayed with them until 2025, mid 2025, progressing from being a transactional lawyer, regulatory lawyer, to marketing, head of litigation, employment law, etc. But really ending my career on a very high note for myself because I really loved what I ended up doing in the latter part of my career, which is privacy, head of IT, and quite frankly, AI governance. I know everybody's AI is the word, of the day, the flavor of the day. But once ChatGPT hit in the late 2023, I believe, you know, it really boomed into a opportunity for a lot of people, both in technology, legal, etc. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to ride that wave early on and help the financial services company that I was working for, TIAA, develop, I believe it was the first in the industry in January of 2024. We had a socially responsible, if you want, AI policy that we developed and published, and AI governance frameworks and risk frameworks. So that's the part of my career over 30 plus years that I really loved and enjoyed doing.
So, tell me this. I work with a lot of people who kind of say, wow, my career has just kind of happened to me. But you were able to go from a place of, you started out there, you were there for a long time, and you progressed your career in what seems to be a strategic way. Like, how did you know when it was ready to try to level up, when you were making the right moves or, avoiding other moves? Like, how did you work through all of that?
That's a great question. And you're absolutely right. I was very strategic with my moves in my career. But I think what helped my strategy, and maybe your audience feels the same way, is that I stayed constantly curious. So, what I mean by that is, as soon as I hate to say it, but as soon as I got bored with a type of transaction or a type of process or anything that I was governing or managing at the time, I would actually raise my hand and say, you know what? I think I can do something different. I think I can do something else. And I had the benefit that staying with the same company and building up my own brand, my own reputation as to being able to deliver, being able to execute, being able to lead, you get back what you put in. So the leaders kindly said, "Oh, Olivia wants to do something else. We need some attention here. Great, go there." So switched from a transactional attorney, because I did that for 9 years, a regulatory attorney at TIAA, and I switched into the corporate world that gave me the opportunity of learning and understanding both the processes and the requirements behind things like marketing, like technology, like litigation, even employment and benefits law, and some tax, although I don't want to touch that. So I strategically sought out things that interested me and also continued to build on the knowledge bank that I was accumulating through the experiences I was having. And quite frankly, technology became something that attracted me with all of the cyber, with the privacy issues that were beginning to develop, as my career was progressing. Privacy was at one point something very few people even thought about. Most people were kind of like, oh God, it's privacy. I'll give it to somebody who wants to deal with it. So strategically, you have to think about, where is the industry going? Where is the economy going? What is happening around you? And then if you happen to work for organizations that are either large enough or law firms that have different practices, to really raise your hand and say, I want to try this. I think I can do it, and bring that to the table.
I'm gonna be very vulnerable. I have a thing in me where if I wonder if I'll be successful, if I'm nervous, if I go, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure I can be successful here. That fear, oftentimes, that perfectionism, I have to be perfect or I'm not going to do it, really is in my head. Was that ever an issue for you? Did you look at things and go, I am bored here. I want to do something new. But then the new thing, what you're looking to do, is different and scary. Like, how do you get over that type of fear?
Every time I raised my hand, I was saying, "Oh my God, here's my way out the door," you know? So believe me, totally get that feeling and I understand it. The way I got over the fear, quite frankly, was by really educating myself on the issues, on the concerns. Look, if you're in a position, if your job you're in, right, Mark, at your level where you are today, you didn't get there by luck, by chance. You worked at it. There's a lot of knowledge within yourself that you can apply, and you have to have the courage to pivot, but you also have to have the courage to fail. I'll be very honest with you. And you have to have the courage to fail and own that failure, because what I have found, in especially having been with this organization or with TI for as long as I have, I think the fear of failure is what keeps people from even being promoted or taking the next chance of getting at the next level. And if you're fortunate enough to build your brand and to build your reputation that brings a lot of qualities and a lot of value to an enterprise or to a law firm or wherever it is you're working, failure, while not expected or wanted, is understood. And when you say to yourself and to leadership and to the people reporting to you, all right, we messed this one up. Let's fix it and we'll deal with the lessons learned later. It is truly an amazing thing to see happen, because people, even those who report to you, or even those who are your bosses or your supervisors, no longer look for the scapegoats, but they say, okay, that got messed up, but it got fixed. And this is what we got out of it. This is what we learned. This is what we can use in the future to not make that mistake. But the fear of failure is always there. It's just a matter of not being afraid to fail and being willing to say, all right, let's move on. Let's see what we can take from here. And mea culpa, I
Yeah.
get it.
It's so fascinating because to me, at first glance, like the easier said than done comes into my head where I go, fear of failure, don't be afraid to fail. And then I go, oh, wait, but it is purely a mental thing, right? It's just about how
Yeah.
you perceive yourself and what you bring to the table and what makes you unique and different and all of those things. And when you actually step into who you are, what you're capable of, and you go, look, if trying and failing or trying and succeeding is what it takes to move me forward, to progress my knowledge of my own field, or whatever that is, if you can purely change the mindset, and it is at certain points just a switch that gets flipped, that's what propels you into the next level.
No, it is absolutely true. And I think, especially with lawyers, I have to say, because they get pegged or we get pegged into, and I've seen it in my own practice at TIAA, their expertise builds on, well, I've spent 20 years doing bankruptcies, or I've spent 20 years doing litigation, or I've spent, 30 years doing this. And there's such a comfort level in the knowledge you accumulate that you feel, oh, how could I possibly turn from, when I was doing deals, I was thinking, well, I'm a securities lawyer. What do I know about corporate law? And it was not a comfortable space to be in. But at the end of the day, and I do have to credit the chief legal officer at the time, George Madison, who said to me, because I did have that concern, Livia, you're a securities lawyer, you can do anything. Now, do I believe that? Yes, today I do, because granted, he gave me that kind of push out into the corporate world when I was questioning my own ability to do so. But quite frankly, I think you can, if you can get over that fear, or if you have a sponsor, which is really important, or a mentor who's willing to say to you, hey, Mark, listen, you've done this, you can do anything. With that kind of a backup and support, I think people can really change their career in a different direction in a very strategic way. So I guess it's important to find somebody in your organization that at the end of the day becomes not just a mentor, but really a sponsor.
I want to shift gears for a second, just because like, I don't get access to people like you very often who are absolute experts in really specific fields, especially related to AI. So, talk to me a little bit about what you've learned over the past couple of years, because AI is moving at lightning speed. We're all like dizzy from trying to keep up with it. But talk from your perspective, understanding the privacy of it all, where AI is taking us, where we should avoid it, letting it take us, things like that. Like, I just kind of want your opinion on this like AI revolution and what you've seen in the corporate space related to that.
It's another great question, and it's got so many things to
Yeah.
unpack in there, right? I mean, well, the one thing I can tell is that I can say is that AI, obviously, everybody knows, has been around since the 50s, right? It wasn't generative. It was a different type of AI. It was more formula based. You put in a formula, you put in an algorithm, you got the results, et cetera. It wasn't predictive. I think what ChatGPT and all of the other AI tools that followed, what brought to the table was this predictiveness, right? That the fact that they consume all this data, and they can kind of make through their system and processes certain predictions and bring out answers. And therein lies also the problem that they hallucinate, and they make up answers, and they make up all sorts of stuff. I and now you hear everybody talking about agentic AI, and you know it's a very charged question to me, because what I think each institution and each individual that works for institutions that's considering AI, aside from governance, which obviously is key, and having a robust, developed governance based on what the company needs, because a lot of executives these days will ask, they see somebody else building an AI tool, and I want that. Why don't we have that? We should all have that. And the answer may be, well, we don't need that. So before companies launch into AI and spend, quite frankly, millions and millions of dollars, I think us having a strategy around what you want to do with AI, where do you need it? Do you need predictive AI, or do you need just non-predictive, the usual, old school AI, which is what asset managers have been using for years? It's really important for companies to first decide that. And then they have to also decide, well, just because you can do something, especially for in medical fields or insurance companies, even that, for healthcare reasons, whatever, healthcare industry, just because you can do something, should you? And I think ethics have, and the role of ethics in AI development and guardrails is huge. I think humanity has a lot to gain by technology and developing technology and emerging technology. But it also has a lot to lose if we lose sight of our own humanity. And that applies in healthcare, applies in finance. It really applies in how we treat pretty much a global environment through building these tools and using them in a way that may or may not be ethical. Data, obviously, AI consumes a lot of data. I mean, that's the only way you get good at, and you learn, and these things learn on their own, and they correct themselves, and they start, becoming more and more independent, quite frankly, the more data they consume. And that's where the privacy kicker kind of comes in, because Whose data is it? Is it my data? Do I own my own data even? You hear about all the lawsuits about scraping data, AI being trained on data that they didn't have rights to, copyrights. I mean, there's so many issues across the use, development, implementation of AI tools that any company that wants to start doing that, that's why I said at the beginning, you should have a strategy, is because you have to understand what is it you're building, what are you building it for, what do you have rights to, what you don't have rights to, and you need to go and get those rights. You may not be able to, you may. And then you look at personal data and how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect the consumers? How do we protect ourselves from having our own information that we input into these tools, computers, phones, smartphones, whatever technology, Alexa? How do we protect ourselves from relinquishing rights and giving our data up freely? Because it clearly has value and a lot of value. So that's why I said the question was loaded, and you kind of have to pull it apart a little bit because regulation is never doesn't seem to, I shouldn't say it's never, but doesn't seem to be able to keep up with the technological developments. We still use laws that are outdated. We try to fit a square peg into a round hole, take old laws and try and see how they apply to AI technology, privacy, etc. Privacy, it's in a better space, but again, we try to leverage what we have. And developing AI rules and regulations, the EU is far ahead of us as usual. But on the other hand, the EU may be stifling some of the development. Do you really want to have that much regulation where you end up not being able to fully take advantage of technology? It's a balance that needs to be struck both from a regulatory perspective and internally within companies. They have to strike their own balance as what's the return on the investment. You don't want it just because you want it. You should want it because it actually helps your organization with efficiencies, that there's a rational return on the investment you make, more than just that the CEOs or some other executive says, well, I want one of those. I think that's a very dangerous path to go
Yes.
down for any company.
That's a great cautionary tale, and I feel like so many people are going to have your voice in the back of their head as they're thinking through these things and these decisions that they're making for their organizations because, it's attractive, right? It's shiny and it's new and it's interesting and there's so much promise. And then you have to really step back and go, "Oh, wait, let me look, at both the 30,000-foot view and then at the individual, in my organization, how are people going to be using this? We have to look at that view too." There's so much to consider there.
I think companies and executives in particular are concerned with competitiveness. Am I going to be competitive if I don't have this? And again, you need to stay competitive. I think you should look at AI. I think any company, it behooves them to actually look at their processes, systems, people, and understand, is AI a tool that can help in any of these categories? And that at the end of the day, provide me with a return on investment. Because otherwise, spending money on just developing tools because they're there and you want to stay competitive, you actually become, I believe, you become less competitive because it takes a lot of energy, real energy, not personal energy. You're consuming a lot of resources on developing it. And then, if at the end of it, you only have the need in your company that 10 people can use that tool, is that really a wise investment? Well, yeah, now you have this tool too, but was it worth the money? And was it worth the expense and the time? But to remain competitive, you really ought to do your homework and look at your own organization and look strategically at your company and say, okay, where does it make sense to pursue it and where does it not? Even though, the executives want it. And I got to tell you, the hardest thing will be to say to your boss, I don't think this is a good investment, especially if that boss happens to be, whoever they are, maybe even the CEO. Again, not related to TI. I'm just saying I've seen and I've experienced times where bringing people from that hyper excitement to, yeah, let's go get it, to, well, maybe you don't want to get it. It is a hard thing to do. So for that, you need to really get the input and value from your finance people, from your technology people, from your compliance people, from your regulatory people, from your lawyers, from your risk people. especially as an attorney, you shouldn't go in there unarmed with the information and the support of the other. It takes a village. It really does, both to approve the strategy that you're pursuing for AI, but also to support you when the answer should be no.
Yeah. I read a LinkedIn post the other day from somebody who said that he got a big promotion and a huge bonus and all of these things for introducing AI into his company. And he said that after 1 year, he looked at it and it was like 12% of people had adopted the AI. He said, I did all the right things. He got legal and compliance and risk, and everybody was on board and they did this whole thing. And no one ever stopped to ask, are our employees going to use this, and how do we train them on it so that they want to actually use it to increase the efficiencies? So he said, the sales team, we introduced this whole AI system and all these automations, and 12% of the sales team used it. And so you also have that consideration. Is this what the people want who are doing the execution?
And I think part of that answer, I think that's a great point, because I think part of the answer and part of the question is training. Let's face it, a lot of people, when they hear AI is coming to your company, are going to think, oh, my job's out the window. So resistance to adoption is a real thing in organizations. And to get around resistance to adoption is really education, which is slash training. It's making people understand that, look, instead of being afraid of it, embrace it, because those employees who actually embrace AI, understand it, value how it's being used, and getting rid of some of the mundane, less, it's true, less important, if you want, or less challenging and complex questions or work products, and you move that onto an AI, and you start to look at material that's complex, questions that are more interesting, making sure that the answers you get from AI even, fit within the strategy you have for your business, and not just for accuracy. I'm just talking about, is this the right path to go on? I think that work is more exciting than having everything on your plate and not wanting to give anything away because you're becoming concerned with, is my job at risk? So training, I think it's a huge opportunity for companies to educate their employees into, hey, it's not the big bad wolf at your door. The reality is, will some jobs be impacted? Yes, but you can retrain your staff. You can, and maybe you also have to explain and think about it from an employment perspective in a way that instead of hiring six lawyers, I'm only going to need three. Yes, it's true. I'm not going to hire six, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to look to get rid of the lawyers I have now. It's just that my budgeting, my planning might change because of how AI and tools are being used. But the upscaling, the leveling up, I think that's also a real thing. I think that, again, employees that do not learn about AI, that don't want to be trained on AI, resisting, I think they're going to have a hard time in companies that want to provide their employees with the benefits of, hey, I'm going to give you training at the next level. This is what you're going to do. This is what your job is going to look like. Jobs that exist today may not exist tomorrow as AI develops. But on the other hand, there may be jobs out there that we're not even
Right.
thinking about because they don't exist
Yep.
today, but they're coming. So I think employees need to be, and people need to be flexible and always looking out to the future and really not kind of getting stuck. It goes back to my staying curious part. People will succeed as long as they keep that flexibility and open mindedness to resist this technological advancements. Resistance is futile, but it's it's just going to slow down those individuals as opposed to slowing down the
That
company.
makes me think of I was in some continuing education the other day through the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches, and we were talking about AI and how we were very concerned in my industry, like, oh, AI is going to replace us because everyone is going to write their resume on ChatGPT, and I'm not going to have it. And what we're learning over the past few years of now having this as a tool is AI is not going to take my job, but I am going to take the job of someone who doesn't use AI because I do, right? So I'm not worried
Absolutely.
about somebody, you know, using ChatGPT rather than using me and coming to me for resume writing and career coaching advice. The thing that I would be worried about if I'm not using those tools myself is people who are using those tools are going to be able to do it better than I can, right? So now it just makes
Of
it my
course.
processes better, and it's for me all about the process of it, right? The writing, the coaching, it's still very grounded in humanity, in me, in who I am, and my personality. I use those tools then just to make me better and more efficient. And that's where, I mean, at an enterprise level, like you're talking about, digital transformations, emerging tech oversight, like the cybersecurity, the data protection of it all, these are the things that like you're thinking about at that highest level. So as you have developed expertise in these areas, talk to me about how you then got into the idea of, oh, I want to do board work. Like, when did that thought enter your brain? How did you start pursuing that? And then I'll probably ask you to describe a little bit of what you've done on the board and advisory level. But tell me, in its infancy, when was the first time that you thought, oh, I have all of these skills now in all these different areas, I should become a board member rather than just, let my career pan out and then retire?
Really have been very fortunate in my career at TIA because privacy, for example, I'm going to take you from AI back to privacy and why it took me to boards. I started with privacy when there was absolutely no privacy department, et cetera. And I built a whole privacy practice, just like I built an AI legal practice at TIAA from scratch. And quite frankly, on a dime. I'm not going to disclose how much, but it was leveraging inside talent, recognizing people that, hey, I can teach you privacy, but you know so much more about IT, or I can teach you privacy, but you're a project manager and you're fabulous at it, and you're a compliance person, et cetera. So I started building all of these practices, and today they're humming, I want to say. And I'm proud of that because I think throughout my career, those accomplishments, it does feel very good. But I like to build things. I mean, that's one of the things that I've discovered is that I like to create, I like to build, and I like to govern, to give that governance perspective and the risk perspective and finance and bring it all in. And I discovered that a lot of companies, and especially startups, quite frankly, and family owned companies, right, are going through various different transformations at different stages, at different paces, at different speeds. And I love that advisory and building function. And I love to bring these practices together. So it's not just my own expertise, but I like reaching across the table and saying, hey, I've seen you in meetings. You talk about XYZ. I think you're great for this. Let's do this. Or have you thought about thinking in a different way? Having participated on a lot of company risk management committees and being the head of the data management and privacy committee, the co-head of that, in that position, it's more of a advisory oversight function as opposed to the doer. And being able to guide and being able to help build a strategy and being able to advise executives on, well, have you thought about it doing this way? Or have you want to achieve XYZ goal. Your opportunities may exist, and then guide them down the path of what their opportunities may be, the tools they could use, or, the rocks to look under. I really enjoy that. And I think people who enjoy that kind of advice giving, oversight, guidance, when they have the experience, naturally consider, at least for me, it was a natural fit to say, I want to do more of this and I want to do it for more companies and more opportunities, whether they're a startup, as I said, family owned, public, whatever. But I'm really more focused on that family to startup because I think they're the ones that give you the most challenging work and the most interesting stuff.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
I'm just pursuing interests and
Yeah.
fun, to be honest. And to me, that's
That's
fun.
really cool. It's really fascinating to me the transition that I see in a lot of people where and it's a hard transition for a lot of people where you move from I'm the doer, I'm the executor, I'm building things from scratch. It's very I am in the trenches, even if you're, building a
Hmm.
team and bringing people together like you've done, to that switch that happens where you go, I'm just the advisory now. I'm just on the board. I don't go out and do it, but
Yeah.
I'm setting the path. I'm charting that course. Was that a hard transition for you when you started to move into like board level and advisory level roles where you were like, oh, I kind of want to be in there doing it? Or were you happy to sit back?
It's a little bit of both. I always have to pull myself back. And I think a good thing about it is that When I started doing advisory board work, I was still full time at TIA. So I knew my legal restrictions, right? So those legal restrictions helped me pull back a lot. I think if those legal restrictions weren't there, my natural tendency was to say, okay, do this, tell people more of a directive. Have you thought about, let's do
Yeah.
this, and soliciting the input from everybody. The more I look back at how I performed as a doer, the harder it is to divorce myself of that and say, okay, you gotta let go. You gotta let go. Having TIA as my employer was a reminder all the time. As I move away from that, I'm hoping that I can restrain myself and still think of it as I have an employer or somebody to pull myself back, but it's a switch that you have to make. I went through this, and I do recommend it highly, the KPMG training, board advisory training university and course that helped tremendously. Not only because it put me in contact with people like yourself, that I met a lot of really talented, really skilled individuals, but it really helped shape a vision of what you need to be when you sit on the board or an advisory board versus what you're doing in your what you did in your past or what you're doing now when you are the actual doer, the performer of the
Yeah.
function.
It's so interesting that, I mean, that's like a soft skill in the extreme, right? Is to learn to make that transition in your mentality. So I was going to bring up the KPMG training that you went through because I think that everyone that I see who's, advancing onto boards says the same thing. It's an amazing program. It prepared me so well. So talk about what you then went and did. Like, how much of your board experience and your advisory experience can you share with us about what you do and who you do it for? Talk a little bit about that.
Again, it's a nascent advisory experience if you want, since you know, perform most of my functions at TIAA. But I did sit on, and I do sit on the advisory board of a startup that really deals with privacy response. It's a very interesting role to play because, as I said, when I started doing this, I was still a TIA employee. So I had to step back from being an advisor that's with their hands in the pie or the chef. I had to be kind of the taster, maybe. So having meetings with the founders and understanding their strategy and providing feedback on different products or different approaches that they had at the time. Now they're well on their way and doing very very well on their own, but that was a very interesting because being approached by companies to be on their advisory board, I am very selective as to where I say yes and when I say no. But this company in particular and its founders, I really thought was something worth taking a look at a little bit deeper and decided to join them. And I don't regret it. I think they're doing fabulously. And the role is very different, right? So whenever they had questions around their products, as I said, or around the risk strategies or what companies are looking for, what would be my feedback and input in terms of what would be helpful, they did a fabulous job, not just with me, but with the other advisors, right? Because I'm not the only board advisor. There were others as well. And I think they've been extremely successful in their product launching and in raising capital and being well on their way. I also sat on the board of a nonprofit school for the 2 full terms that you could sit on, and then after that you're done. And that was a little bit more hands-on, but I think that's the nonprofit nature. It was, a Chinese school, Northern Westchester Chinese school, and it was more of a doer, I would say, but that's because of the nature of the job and the nonprofit. It was really all volunteers. All of us were there to really help the school flourish, attract not only students, but actually talents and professors who wanted to teach there. So it was a labor of love, I will call it. And I really enjoyed that because I had the liberty to not just give the advice, but also do some of the stuff myself. So that
Yeah.
was
Well,
good.
and probably a really good transition too, because you were doing that before starting into, more corporate startup environment board
Yes.
roles. So you kind of got
Yes.
some of that experience of like bridging the gap a little bit, which is nice. That's
Absolutely.
really fascinating. Well,
Absolutely.
I've loved learning all about the career where you've been. The AI conversation was really cool too, but I want to end with thinking about maybe, because this is called the boardroom, right? Not Board, but Bored. So talk to me about, and we covered this a little bit, but I want to boil it down so that we can really help others to kind of understand how do they get out of the boardroom, right? The Bored room, and move themselves toward the boardroom that you're now in. That you're having companies come request you to be on their boards. How do you how did you avoid getting bored and then kind of advancing into this next chapter in your career?
It's an interesting question. How do you avoid getting bored? You avoid getting bored by being open-minded and always looking to learn. I'll be honest with you. You're right. Like I said before, every time I got actually bored with a transaction or process or whatever, I would raise my hand and say, I want to learn something new. It's tough. I mean, the learning curve sometimes is really high, right? Especially with technology. Moving from securities laws to technology is a whole different ball game. And the people are different, the mentality is different, the language is different, everything is different. So being willing to take some career risks and being willing to have that, okay, this is going to be tough but it's worth doing mentality and approach, I think will be very helpful. And it's the same with boards, right? I look at myself because that's the only person I can speak about. I've built a career of 30 plus years, with most of it within one organization, although I've been in different divisions, departments, areas. I looked at myself and said, what's next, Livia? What's next for you? And I am looking at myself as, okay, I have a wealth of information, a wealth of expertise. I continue to learn. I continue to attend seminars. I continue to read books. I continue to read materials, keeping that interest going around AI, around governance, technology, etc. Because that's my space. I mean, your space and others may be their space, but keeping yourself current, especially in technology, because you blink and you miss
Yes.
it. And then looking at, okay, with all this information, how can I help? It's really what can I do to help others? Whether it's a company, in my job before, I started looking at boards, I was looking at talent. I was looking at talent all around me, identifying the talent and saying, how can I help this person when I see them and I see how good they are in a particular function? How can I help them focus so that you can always have a backup, right? You can always move on and somebody comes up behind you and they're there, they can step into your shoes and you have the freedom to move on. I think helping through your experiences, not just yourself, but even those around you, comes back immensely in personal satisfaction and professional satisfaction for myself. And then I look at boards and say, well, why can't I do that with companies? I mean, if I can do that within my company, maybe I can use some of the expertise, or maybe there may be companies out there who are looking for somebody who's willing to do that at their company. And while I don't want to be an employee, and I'm not looking to be an employee, being a board member satisfies that thirst, satisfies that drive to share, to impart, and to keep learning. I'm not the all knowing of everything, but in a board atmosphere, you learn from your colleagues as well, for the other board members. You don't just learn from the company that you are in, the industry that you're serving, but you're learning from everybody around you. And I think as long as you keep that mentality and that thirst of knowledge, I mean, it may sound cliche, Mark, but honestly, that's what I think makes all of this very interesting and enables you to get to the next
Yeah.
level.
Well, I mean, there's your twofold approach, right? When you're pouring into yourself and you're learning and you're curious and you become the
Yeah,
foremost expert in whatever it is your area of expertise is, and you dive deep with that, then it allows you to give to others and to engage with people and to lift other people
right.
up. I see those two things so commonly in the most successful, sure, but honestly, like the coolest leaders that I know, the people that I like look up to and admire, folks like you, where I look and I'm like, that's what I want to be personally. And I know that's what
Yeah,
so many other people see and want to emulate. And it's not that hard of a formula. It's pour into yourself and then lift other people up.
it really is. I think when teams see the leadership really investing in the team, not just in themselves and not just in where's my next promotion, but it's more of a where can I lift this team? How can they perform at an optimal level? I got to tell you, you become the envy of a company because within the company, highly efficient, highly effective teams are really kind of the golden eggs, if you want, of an organization. And I can tell you, my teams have always been envied by other teams because we didn't have a lot of people. We didn't have to spend a lot of money to get a lot of people, but we were highly efficient and effective. And I think a lot that had to do with the people's, the value that was recognized and bringing them up and being open to, you know what, we're all in this together. We're all going to make mistakes. We talk about mistakes and fears. Let's forget about that. We'll deal with the mistakes as they come, but we're all in this together. Let's fix it. Let's look forward and really pushing people forward and not being afraid of that. I think a lot of leaders, if I may say, throughout my career, I've seen leaders who, you know, it's almost as if they're afraid that they're not the smartest person in the room. And I think when you have the freedom to say, which I do, I'm not the smartest person in the room. And I say that to my teams all the time. You know what? I'm going to learn from you. You're going to learn from me. And if I make a mistake, you guys call me out because I won't know it's a mistake just because I'm your leader. Don't keep
Right.
quiet. And I really think that that enables a company a lot more in being successful than, almost anything else. It's culture, culture, culture. And getting to the next level and making them understand, hey, if I'm going to the next level, so can you, and so can you. These are the things that you need to do for yourself and for those around you, and then move on. And hopefully, you find what you're looking
That's
for.
right. I love it. This conversation makes me so happy. It's so much fun to talk to somebody like you who a leader who just gets it, right? Who it really invests in other people. And then watching your impact then grow over the years is phenomenal. I'm so excited to see where you go with board work, with advisory work. You're going to impact generations to come with everything that you're doing. And I'm so grateful for all the work you're doing and your willingness to come and share it with everybody else too is just such a testament to your character. And I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Mark, it's my pleasure. I love talking to you, and I know I'm going to keep in touch with you. I'm going to haunt you after these
I like
calls.
it.
You're not going to get rid of me.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks for spending time with me in the boardroom. If today's conversation sparks something for you and you want clarity on what comes next, visit theboardroom.net to book a reset session or to learn about upcoming leadership retreats. Your next move does not have to wait. I'll see you next episode.